it sucks.
Yeah,
It's really, really hard in the rain. It's a million times. It's one of those tracks actually, which isn't that hard in the dry, but in the rain, it really sucks.
He's trying to show his fight and determination to make sure he has a seat in a great car next year, which he will.
Yeah, we're talking about Alonso, who he's been able to keep it going and that, but in the place of Danny Rick.
Hello and welcome to the On Track GP podcast right here on DR Sports. We're back with another week. It's another race. We were back in China this weekend, and of course, Max Verstappen tops the pile, doesn't he? Joining me today is of course Rich and Robbie. Guys, it's always good to be back underway racing after a couple of weeks off. Max Verstappen back top of the pile again. Good race as well for Checo, and Lando sandwiched in between those two. We hadn't seen China for quite a while, but it's a popular race. It's now been reinstated. Were you happy to see it back?
Yeah, I was happy to see it back because I was in China when the whole world went a bit crazy in 2020, and it's nice because this is sort of the first sign that place has returned to normal. And it's like the world now has completely returned to normal. We're 100% back to how we were. And that's really good. But the other really cool thing as well is China was always quite a hard sell in the past. Like there was always some empty seats and stuff. But this race has been sold out since December.
Wow.
And people cannot get tickets. It was completely rammed. And it's quite nice to see the evolution, the popularity of Formula One with obviously Drive to Survive, Zhou and stuff. So, no, I think it was really positive. Really good to see it back.
Did you enjoy the race?
Yeah, I did. You know what? I enjoyed the race. Obviously, the winner won very easily as usual. But I thought there was many other elements of the race that were really good. And it was great to see Lando Norris, getting a second place, getting a podium. And like you said, it was really well attended. When the home driver was driving past, the noise and support that he got, even though he's driving in that steak. It was fantastic atmosphere. So I enjoyed it actually.
Yeah, it's good to see that one back on the calendar. Let's start with kind of free practice and sprint quali. We had a bit of rain as well, which we do love when we get a little bit of rain in F1 because it makes things interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course. And also China, like I've driven there in the rain in the World Endurance Championship. It sucks.
Yeah,
it's really, really hard in the rain. It's a million times. It's one of those tracks actually, which isn't that hard in the dry, but in the rain it really sucks. It's so difficult. So I was actually really excited for a wet race, but unfortunately we didn't get that. But it was interesting because there was a lot of concerns about the surface and everything before, and it was okay whilst it was slippery. It was nice to see that it put, especially during the sprint qualifying when that was wet, it made it quite entertaining. But it means if it rains in the future, I think it could be quite a good thing.
Just sorry, Abby, right? Because this has always baffled me, right? And obviously you're a driver. There's drivers who say they love driving in the rain.
Yeah,
right? I don't know. You can't see anything.
Yeah,
it's just got to be like, that's just daredevil business, isn't it? I mean, do you in general, do you love it? I know you said that one sucks. In general, do you like driving in the rain? I can never figure out how they do it.
It's really...
I don't like driving in the rain here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Bad enough in the car with wipers. They ain't got no wipers.
No, it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. If you're testing on your own and you're on a track with a really good surface where the water drains really well, it's actually really enjoyable because it's something different. But honestly, any driver who says they enjoy racing in the rain, because that's completely different, because you cannot, honestly, until you actually experience it, you cannot stress how bad the spray is. Like we've got those rain lights, which are really bright on TV. If you're within 20, 30 meters of a car in front, you do not see the rain light. I've had races before where you're going down a straight at 160, 170 miles an hour. And I've been looking up at Suzuka on the way to 130R because I knew there was a bridge 200 meters before the corner. I knew as long as I braked at that bridge, then I'd be able to slow down. And then when you do slow down, you're like, oh, the car in front is 60, 70 meters ahead of me. I didn't need to brake that early. It is actually frightening.
I think that must be terrifying.
It's terrifying.
No, they do it. I was looking and saying that's like a daredevil.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's why when
they're still driving so close.
But that's why when it rains, we're obviously, I guess, like fans get excited, don't they? Because they're like, great, we're going to get a red flag. Like, because 9 times out of 10, something will happen when the rain's coming down.
Something happens, and then it's a certain element of skill comes into it, and I think drivers end up driving almost subconsciously, like just using their natural instincts, because your conscious mind is thinking, oh my word, this is completely insane. And you never get used to it. I mean, I've been racing now for 23 years, and I've done millions and millions of laps. Well, not millions, but a lot of laps in the rain. and you never ever get used to not being able to see. But we
Yeah.
we manage it and we go round, so it just kind of happens,
It's just like you go into cruise control.
Yeah, exactly.
And just manage it. Sprint race results. Obviously, Max, he did win the sprint ahead of Lewis Hamilton and Checo. Leclerc and Sainz 4th and 5th, Norris and Piastri 6th and 7th. We've always said we're not lovers necessarily of sprints. They did get better as the calendar went on last season. But did you enjoy this sprint race? First one.
Yeah, it was just because it was nice to see Hamilton actually competing for once this season, So, yeah, I don't mind the sprint races. I don't mind the sprint races at all. But, yeah, I mean, the result was getting a little bit inevitable. But, I thought it was just for the sake that Hamilton was up there and it was just nice to see him in and amongst it. And I was sort of thinking, he might have a good actual
go on to have a good race.
Which he didn't. I mean, he had a horrendous qualifying, but in the sprint he did well.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Hamilton a little bit more in depth and what happened in quali. But just on the sprint, there was a little bit of infighting with the two Ferraris, and Charles Leclerc made a point of saying he hasn't been too pleased kind of with that. He feels that Carlos Sainz is fighting against Charles more than anyone else on the track. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I don't think it's a fair assessment. I think that, he's just fighting everybody as hard as he wants. And you always feel more aggrieved when you're actually in the incident than when you're the car who's not in the incident, because it directly affects you, whereas normally you're going to benefit from it, right? And I think that's a little bit of political mind games from Charles there. And
but also, like Charles is safe in the seat.
Yeah,
He's not
exactly.
going
He's got
anywhere.
nothing to prove.
Like-
It should be signs. He should be having
Exactly.
having a
Like
pop,
Carlos hasn't got a seat for next season. Arguably, he's having he's having a better season than Charles so far, anyway.
Yeah.
And like, if he wants to fight, like he's trying to show his fight and determination to make sure he has a seat in a great car next year, which he will.
Yeah, exactly. And I completely agree with that, actually. But to be honest, Charles has got nothing to prove. And at the end of the day, they didn't have any contact and there wasn't any messages about it, from the management afterwards. So, yeah, I'm sorry, but you're just going to have to suck up and deal with it. They are both still individually racing at this point. I didn't notice that. But as I said, as a driver, you always feel more aggrieved when it happens.
You drivers like to moan, don't you?
We do like to moan. Honestly, we're like a bunch of OAPs. We just anything we can. Look at all the moans that people were saying about the sprint race, and look, none of it came true.
True. I know actually they have got better, the sprint race.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's move on to quali. Obviously, Max Verstappen taking pole position. That was Red Bull's 100th pole position in F1, which is incredible.
It's quite impressive.
What did you make of the qualifying session?
I thought Max was just untouchable, and even under any circumstances was just imperious. And I think we're starting to witness greatness. Where you can put him in the same light as some serious people, because he's just making it look so easy. I thought that I was very impressed with was Nico Hulkenberg. And it's something that I've been saying last week. I tell you, that guy's got to be a contender for that Mercedes seat.
Yeah, you have mentioned that, haven't you? It's a second driver, obviously, to George.
Yeah. Hey, he was 0.6 off of Verstappen. Okay, he ended up P9, but it's incredibly close, I thought that Bottas also did an excellent job.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Getting the Sauber into Q3 is always a pretty decent job you can do. Lewis was obviously the shock going out in Q1. He was P18 out of qualifying in Q1. He did a very good recovery, I guess you could say, to go from P18 to P9. But why do you think that happened in qualifying? What went wrong for Lewis?
Yeah, it was strange because, as I said, he had a good sprint race, looking good for the weekend. First sort of time, he looked like Lewis. He had a smile on his face. And then it's a horrendous qualification. He was moaning about his car right throughout the race, wasn't he?
When has he not been moaning about the car? For the last 3 years of Lewis.
As I said, his drivers are like to moan, you know what I mean? So
I had to say though, I was watching his onboard from the race, and the amount of understeer he had. I mean, those front tires were just doing nothing for him. And to be honest, China is the worst track in the world to have understeer. You'd much rather have oversteer there because the corners are so long. If you have understeer, you just can't get back on the power. And so when you hear him moaning about the front of the car and everything, and you watch it, it's just plowing, It looks like no matter how much he turns, the car's just not going to rotate. So
yeah, I mean, I've had felt for him in terms of the car, but at the same time, we have been saying, just do the best you can. You know, you're leaving anyway. Let's try and make the best out of this last season at Mercedes. And it didn't look so good. Some other qualifying moments that happened. Obviously, Yuki, he had a DRS issue in Q1. They did get it working. Sergio Perez, he was kind of pissed off that he was impeded as well by Alex Albon. Logan Sargent, he of course ruined his final lap with the spin. He ended in last place. Another one. Carlos Sainz, there was that red flag. He spun out of the final corner in Q2, tapped the barriers, and that kind of took him out of the session. He did kind of manage to fight back, you know, P3 after the restart. What did you feel like in terms of Ferrari this weekend?
I have to say, first of all, compliments to Sainz, because if you go into the wall and you only get minor damage, it's, you know, psychologically, it does make your body start to think about, you know, crashes and stuff like that. To then jump back in it and perform how he did in Q3 and just forget it immediately. That is really, really difficult to do. Can you imagine crashing your road car and then just getting back in it and going straight on the motorway, you know, if it's been magically repaired or something like that?
Definitely not.
So to then go and drive at 200 miles an hour in the fastest cars in the world, it's very, very impressive. I think Ferrari is starting to look pretty good and starting to perform quite well. But Red Bull are just too far ahead, so they're probably not getting the credit that they deserve.
Yeah, I feel like if you're gonna think of who's gonna probably finish second this year, you're not really looking any further than, I guess, the Ferraris, aren't you, in terms of like the constructors. We'll move on quickly to kind of like the race notes, and looking at what happened in that. It was a fast start from Fernando Alonso. Did you see signs or a shade of maybe what we started to see last season that kind of tailed off towards the end?
Yeah, no, definitely. I was thinking that he could, at first, you know, possibly a podium or something. Like, he was looking that good, but tailed off, you know, later on. But yeah, I thought he had he looked really impressive at the start of the race, and you wouldn't believe at his age. Like, he really is rolling back the years.
It's like the Ibrahimovic thing, man. It's like when when you see Ibrahimovic doing what he did at that age, and even Ronaldo now to a certain extent. Yeah. But he's just making Stroll look terrible. I mean, there's no other way.
Having said that, maybe I could. I
mean, what more can we say about Lance Stroll? I mean, I feel like we're just going to end up doing what we always do, which is just turning this into a let's bash Lance Stroll. But I'm so surprised that Fernando Alonso has signed another contract at Aston when there are so many moving parts coming up. Why stay in that team when the other half of your team physically cannot compete?
I mean, you have to actually say that Fernando historically hasn't made the greatest decisions in terms of which team he's gone to. You know, then that's summed up because he's only won 2 world championships a long time ago, and he hasn't won that many races for how clearly, unbelievably talented he is. What a
great driver he is.
Exactly. He deserves to have won far more championships and races. So either he's seen something, because for him it definitely can't be about the money. I mean, he's got more than enough, and that he can't be driven by that. So it's got to be he's seen something in Aston Martin that's making them hungry. He's seen a light at the end of the tunnel. And obviously we've seen those Adrian Newey rumours. So
yeah, and that's what I was going to say. If Adrian Newey went there, and then remember, they do have the investment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's money will be no object.
Stroll's dad.
You know what I mean? So I don't think it's that. I don't think it's for the lack of investment. I think it's for the lack of ambition in terms of the driver partnership.
Yeah.
No, but to be honest, right, maybe he likes having a partner that's not very good.
Because it's no competition, but at the end of the day...
but then remember, back in the day, he never got on well ever with partners, did he?
No,
pushed through.
But
so maybe this is a better dynamic
if
for him.
they're going to have this even more injection of cash, right? And obviously the regulation change and all that. And if they're going to really try and compete, at some point, you do need to have a second driver that is up there and able to defend for you. In the same way that Checo has done it for Max.
Exactly.
You need to have a driver that is capable of doing that. I'm sorry, but I just don't believe that Lance Stroll is that guy.
I think you're completely right, because the other thing that happens, especially when you get into a winning position, you get your teammates' telemetry, you get your teammates' data, so you can actually see where you can be better. But at the minute, can you actually see anywhere that Stroll is even remotely close, let alone better?
And also,
Fernando?
we were extremely critical of Sergio Perez last year for not maintaining that same level he'd done before in terms of the defending and being up there for Max. And if at some point the Astons have that ambition to challenge, which is what, Lawrence Stroll has said. I just don't think they can do that with having an unbalanced team.
Son in the car.
And I'm sorry. Yeah.
And we're back to bashing the Strolls.
I'm
Like,
sorry,
is
but
your son's in the car,
you
right?
can't crash under a safety car into the back of someone. I
Yeah, that's
mean,
what you did in the race, yeah.
yeah, you can't do that. I mean, Ricciardo, he's got every right to be as frustrated as he was.
Talk about Danny Rick. Come on, let's because you feel that's the next one in Miami is going to be his last.
I feel it's going to be his last one. I mean,
He's under pressure.
He's under huge pressure because they got Liam Lawson in the wings, who did an incredible job last year. And he's at every single race now as well, which is not that normal for a reserve driver. And logically it makes sense because you've got the European season back to backs. Effectively, version 2 of the cars comes once they get back to Europe.
Yeah, lots of upgrades.
Lots of upgrades, which will require different driving styles, so it's easier to replace him for that. But it's quite simple. Has he done anything to show you that he deserves to be there ahead of Lawson this year? I mean, even before, the shunt with Stroll wasn't his fault at all. But even before that, he wasn't really doing anything. And I don't think it was Tsunoda's best weekend. He's done nothing to convince me, to be honest, at the minute.
Yeah.
So I think Miami will be his last one.
I've said it on the show before that they kind of bought him back for... In football, we say shirt sales.
Yeah,
You know what
exactly.
I mean, he's a big name.
I liked the idea of him coming back. I think
It's a big name, isn't he? But
perform as much. Yeah, but again,
but his time's gone.
Yeah,
that's the
I think
hard.
psychologically, he's just
Yeah, we're talking about Alonso, who he's been able to keep it going and that, but in the place of Danny Rick, unfortunately, his time's...
And especially the other thing is you've got someone in the wings who can do the job.
Absolutely.
And he's proven himself.
Liam Lawson, 100%. Alpine, again, odd. And there was a mechanic that got hit.
Yeah, I mean, that's just... that's kind of just one of those things. Pit stops are they're like a Swiss watch, all the moving parts have to be perfect, and occasionally things go a little bit wrong, and it's just one of those things. So the good news is the guy is okay, because I tell you, people don't realize how heavy a Formula One car is, but wheels and the momentum they have. You can do a lot of damage with being hit by one of them.
Yeah.
Again, they're just boring and flat, aren't they? You just can't see any spark from Alpine. It's been the same. We said it earlier this season. It's still the same. Yeah. They're going to be another team who's going to be hoping for some big performance from their European upgrades. But they bought a load of upgrades here and it didn't do anything.
No, I think they're some way behind Alpine. That's going to be definitely a work in progress. We had quite a few safety cars, by the way, at the weekend. Yeah. We had a virtual safety car on lap 21, which was brought out by Valtteri Bottas. He came to a stop at turn 11. Multiple drivers pitted on that. Hamilton, Leclerc, Norris missed the chance to stop. He'd already gone past the entry when the virtual safety car come out. And then we move forward to lap 27. That's when it ended. It was deployed again, though, pretty soon after. Spin and retirement for Yuki. He made contact with Kevin Magnussen. The Haas also had a puncture. And then we had another safety car when it ended a little bit later. It ended on 32. And obviously Max then kind of took the lead. And that was that. Obviously, Lando being sandwiched in between the two Red Bulls this weekend is a great weekend for the McLarens. Were you more impressed with them than you have been?
Not pace-wise, really, to be honest with you. I think that they maximised their potential. I think they just had a really good weekend. I don't think it was anything that's going to make us go, McLaren's going to be able to potentially compete with Red Bull.
You still think that they're away? Are they looking where they were last year, or just?
I think they're a little bit below that at the minute, but not too much. But I think Piastri would have had a good race. Andrea Stella after the race said he had big damage from the diffuser, which is such a huge part of the performance of a Formula One car. I think that. I'm excited to see what they can do with the upgrades, especially once the European season comes, because we saw last year when they bought those updates how much progress they made. They clearly have a good R&D team back at base. So I'm quite excited to see where they can go. But I think, they just optimized their performance over the weekend.
It was a couple of penalties as well this weekend. 10 seconds for Sargent for the safety car infraction. Stroll and Magnussen, they both caused a collision, so that was some more.
I think, honestly, before long, Yuki Tsunoda and Kevin Magnussen are going to start getting a bit handbaggy with each other.
Yeah.
We remember what happened in Jeddah, right? And then we had this move at the weekend, and it's
just following on, isn't it, from the criticism, I guess, that the Hasses have been having about them being too, maybe boisterous is the word.
Yeah,
but
boisterous, yeah.
I think that, like I've said it before on the show, I think that Haas are just playing in the game, and if it gets them a point, that's huge.
Yeah, which again, Hulkenberg getting more points. He's just putting them on the board at the minute. Each one for Haas is making a big difference. But I think this is starting to put Magnussen under a little bit of pressure.
Yeah.
He's starting to drive like someone we're seeing the early signs of desperation from him. That move on Yuki was desperate, and maybe that's because of the job that Nico is doing.
Maybe so. Like you say, you think that the Hulk is going to move on, and I don't see that might not happen. I think there's a lot to come in silly season, which we are super excited for. Just to kind of wrap up the race results, it was Max who obviously won, came in P1, Norris P2, and Checo P3. Leclerc and Sainz finished in 4th and 5th. They've been, especially Sainz has been super on it this season. Did you feel like this just wasn't really going to be the race for the Ferraris?
Yeah, they just weren't. They weren't really there. Really, the whole weekend they were. I think again the drivers did a decent job. I think they were just. I
think the car just wasn't suited.
Track doesn't suit.
Yeah.
That track, they don't do great on this track. If I remember rightly, the track doesn't really suit this car, does it?
No, and also the other thing, if you look at the races where they've been strong earlier this year, Bahrain, Australia, Jeddah. Well, Jeddah's a bit different, but Australia and Bahrain in particular, very quick apex corners. And all of the corners in Shanghai are very long radius. So there's a lot of tire loading. It's a completely different dynamic for how the car works. And I think it just didn't suit their strengths. I expect them at Miami, which is obviously street circuit, so a lot more quick radius corners. I expect them to be a lot faster there.
Okay. 6th for George Russell, which again, he's been the only one that's really been doing anything at Mercedes, isn't he? Alonso recovered to P7 after his late stop. Piastri P8 and Hamilton P9. He did start in 18th. Were you impressed with his recovery drive? Or not really?
Not really. I think it's just kind of standard and expected.
Moving that far up.
Yeah, but I mean, he had the advantage of 2 safety cars and everything.
True.
Yeah, that's true.
If he wouldn't have had the advantage of the 2 safety cars, what do you think would have happened?
I think he would have been outside of the points potentially.
Okay.
I think
Interesting.
so.
Yeah, you're right. 2 red flags. But he's still not. He's still gone up like.
He's still.
And then he didn't really have any chance of getting past anybody who's in front of him.
No, but again, and as I said, when you saw the onboard, that car was understeering. That's not a Lewis thing. That's definitely the setup of the car. A driver can't make a car understeer as much as that was.
It's going to be interesting for Miami. Nico Hulkenberg, he topped off the final point with P10. 3 retirements, Ricciardo, Tsunoda, Bottas, and Ricciardo was given a 3-place grid penalty for the next race in Miami for overtaking Nico Hulkenberg under a safety car condition. Very rookie error there. We will obviously dissect Miami a little bit more next week. We have another gap in between, but what is your predictions for Miami?
Max V.
Max V.
Yeah, he'll win. I think the Ferraris might come back into it in this race. But how can you, every race, you can't look past a 1-2 for Red Bull. It's just like who can get in and sort of break that monopoly up a little bit, you know?
Yeah, it's actually.
I think the Ferraris could have something to say in this race.
It's actually frustrating because, like, if you take Max, I mean, it's not frustrating because again we're witnessing greatness. But if you take Max out of the equation, the races are all incredible.
Yeah.
You know, they're really, really good.
But that's like saying that in any sport. Like, you obviously have a team that is the most dominant.
Yeah.
And
He's so dominant. Though.
Yeah,
Did you even hear him on the radio when they won the race?
Yeah, he was just cruising.
They said something. That's 100, or was it in qualification?
I think it was always like a good 15 to 30 seconds ahead, like somewhere in between that.
Yeah, but they said something like that's 100. Was it in qualification?
Must have been quali.
100 poles.
100 poles max. He goes, yeah, that's good. I mean, everybody else, when everybody else is winning it, he wins so much now. It's just like,
yeah, but then for 8 years it was all about Lewis.
Yeah, no, he said,
then
listen,
previously
I
right.
always say, right, you cannot fault Max Verstappen. He's just great, like you said. He's incredible driver in an incredible car, but he ain't really got a lot of charisma. Right, so
I think that's like F1 across the board.
Sorry?
Yeah.
I think that's F1 across the board.
And
that's why Danny Rick is always wanted to be on, is wanting. Obviously, sponsors want him on the grid because he's great to be marketable.
I've always said it before as well that it's not Max Verstappen's fault. It's a bit like I always say, it's like boxing, where sometimes you've got the fighter that's just like all he does is he just goes out to win. He's not in no trash talking. But you need the other guy. You need the other guy competing with him, the trash talker, to make it a really exciting. So you get the two opposites competing. Problem we got at the moment, we got one guy who's just stone cold killer in that car, and then everybody else is just nowhere near him to even If it was maybe him and Lewis going at it, I think we'd have
Which we had in 21 and it was awesome.
it was unbelievable.
Well, and we don't know. We might see that next year when
Maybe-
Lewis is in a Ferrari.
maybe
'cause
when
we
he's
need
back
to see
in the-
Lewis be Lewis again.
Yeah, or even someone like an Alonso, like if he.
But again,
Say he
better
was-
car.
Yeah.
Imagine, right? Imagine how good this would have been, right? Ferrari now have Lewis, Red Bull stay with Max, and Alonso was at Mercedes, and Mercedes turned up in a great car. Imagine the fight that would be.
And then you would see some charisma. I promise
you
you,
would
you'd
see
see
it.
some charisma.
Maybe
That's
Adrian-
like you've robbed us, Fernando. Move.
Maybe Adrian knew if he
Contract.
does go to, because I think he's always the game changer on every car.
Or imagine Checo went to Mercedes.
Yeah, that could
Or
be.
also, we're also banking on Mercedes having a decent car next year. But,
Yeah, exactly.
But that would be good. Imagine Checo got challenging. But you feel the same way, Rich?
Yeah, it's going to be Max. I think you're right. Ferrari are going to come back. Track's going to suit them a lot more. I mean, I hate Miami as a circuit, as a driver's circuit. It's just awful.
Car park, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. The event's quite cool and everything, and I'd like to go to the race, but I think the circuit's pretty naff. But
How could they improve it for you?
Oh, the problem is it's a street circuit. There's not really much you can do. You know, it's pretty hard, to be honest. I mean, drivers generally aren't fans of street circuits. You know, Baku's a bit different, but the others, they're not natural racetracks. But again, you're right. It's just a car park. But I think that it will be interesting to see how Logan's going to do, because at the minute that you can't see any way he's going to hold on to that seat.
Instead of P20, just be P19.
P20 and crashing.
P20 and crashing.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Obviously, we're gonna talk about that next week. Lovely to see you, Rich. Lovely to see you, Rob. Of course, please make sure you do like and subscribe. Obviously, right here on DR Sports. Please like the show on Track GP, and we will see you next week. Where we'll talk all about Miami.